35 years ago, Newsweek asked, is it too late to find Prince Charming? The magazine declared that single women over 40 were more likely to be killed by terrorists than to get married, a controversial calculus debunked by demographers and sociologists and retracted 20 years later. But to many women back then, it felt true. The women's liberation movement collided with a simultaneous baby boom and the boom bust of roller coaster 70s and 80s economies. Women could not have it all then, and income equality haunts our culture still. Nature has always produced more women than men, but the numerator and denominator vary from place to place. And still, till just 2015, China's one-child policy imposed penalties on bigger families, and a cultural preference for males resulted in sex-selective abortion and abandonment, a phenomenon you might have heard called the missing women of China, where there are an estimated 50 million more males than females. One ironic consequence has been many marriage-age wifeless men. The gender ratio is similarly skewed in India, where there are an estimated 35 million more men than women, and where it wasn't until 1994 that law forbade asking about the sex of a baby after an ultrasound scan. A wise man once told me that the most important social skill in Washington, D.C. is yawning with your mouth closed. And as a longtime consultant, I know how to make people yawn. Simply speak the word demographics. But I was so struck by a recent conversation with former Pentagon official Michael Maloof and Strelmark Business Development Consultants President Hilary Fordwich about the consequences of gender imbalance that I wanted to bring you into the loop. Michael, guys our age remember the brutal Khmer Rouge killings in the 70s in Cambodia, where over 1 million suspected victims of execution ended up in mass graves in the killing fields. Some third of Cambodian men. Only gradually has Cambodia recovered, and to this day, the population there is comparatively young. Big picture. What are the military and balance of power implications of gender imbalance?
Well, it's going to have a tremendous impact. Will you have enough men to raise armies? Unless we draft women. But the continuous wars that we're always having, it does have an impact on the male society. Well, look what happened after World War I, World War II. Decimated populations. Germany took years and years to rebuild. And it's probably still got a ratio of more women than men there. And it has long-term generational impact upon a society and upon the world, for that matter.
Indeed, military readiness.
Yeah, military readiness is important, but we have younger people coming up. The optimal time is when they're young. My grandson, for example, just went into buds with SEALs. So he's off and running. That's the new generation coming up. So they're getting ready, but they have to be young, and that's what we're seeing. But they happen to, unfortunately, be the cannon fodder.
Yeah. Old men send young men to war.
That's correct.
Anyone who's married knows that men are from Mars and women are from Venus because we are wired differently. But Hilary, going forward, what are the consequences of gender disparity on an aging population?
Well, there are many things, actually, Holland, and one of them is an increased savings rate, which you could say, well, that's good, but lower consumption, way lower consumption now in China and in India. That affects the US, that affects us here in our economy. They're purchasing things less. Males just don't go shopping as a habit. But it also means that these males, there are, as you mentioned, 40 to 50 million of them in China, 35 million in India. They have no chance of marrying. Now, in particularly in China, but India too, it is a cultural norm. Only over 95% of all males have always been married in China. It's viewed as the way to continue the family name and the heritage of the family and to provide for the family. So one has to wonder, and I actually find it quite terrifying, what are these nations going to do with all these men? They have disposable men. They can go to war, lose 50 million men, and actually be better off. Now, we talked about culturally, and Michael mentioned so aptly about countries after the Second World War. You know, the Russians lost 82% of all males in the Second World, males of age in the Second World War. I've always thought that Russia's then averse to doing that again. China didn't. China didn't actually at all. And so it's not a society that worries about the death of males. So I think it's frighteningly terrible militarily. Also, there's a lot of sex trafficking now. A lot of, obviously they don't have women. They have to get them somewhere. And quite frankly, they could, I don't mean to sound like an alarmist here, but couldn't the Chinese airdrop 50 million men over America and actually not be worried and rather like it?
Ooh, disposable men. I'm still stuck on that.
Which could make China even more prone to want to go to war over Taiwan, for example.
And maybe come here to get the women, all the babies that were sent here.
Exactly, and take them in as theirs.
Right.
This could be an omen for something in the future. Yeah, this could be a more assertive China in the future that we might see because of this demographic disproportion that's occurring.
Yes.
I hadn't thought about it, but I can visualize that potentially happening.
Maybe invade America to take back all those Chinese girls that the men need.
You see why I wanted you in on this conversation. We were all having dinner a couple of weeks ago, and I said, save this. We're going to do this on TV. We're speaking with the Strelmark Business Development Consultants President Hilary Fordwich and longtime former Pentagon official Michael Maloof. On the surface, it sounds like typecasting when, as Hilary just did, we talk about males' propensity to violence and the demand she cited that contributes to prostitution and sex trafficking, and the data is sad and real. Michael, the United States military grapples with violence against women within its own ranks.
Sure.
Grade the Pentagon's response.
Well, I think it's poor, but I think they're trying to improve. Because of the attention that's now being paid on it, there's going to be an independent. They're taking it out of the chain of command. That allows women to feel a little more comfortable about complaints and not having it stopped and then having reprisals and no one ever knows about it. So this is an important thing. It was kept within the group, within the military, and it didn't have an outside optics on the problem to give that woman a fair chance to air her concerns and complaint. And I think that's probably a good thing. But I think that we're going to see increased reporting of this kind of thing now that it's being taken out of that chain of command. And I think that that's very, very serious. You mentioned one thing which was intriguing because of the demographics. I was on the border of Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan years ago when I was at DOD. All of a sudden, all the border guards went away. All the customs people went away. 5 trucks rolled through filled with women from Ukraine.
Wow.
Going up north. And we reported it, but nothing we could do about it. I mean, that's the horrendous thing that we're seeing, the reality that we're seeing today. And it's devastating. And I know sex trafficking is on the rise, and it's going to get even worse because of this democratic disproportion. And this is a very, very serious thing that we need to keep an eye on, and that could impact the balance of power that you talked about earlier.
Now, back to the harassment in our armed services. You see the sign at Amtrak, if you see something, say something.
Yeah.
And clearly that's the message that they are saying gets out, but that aircraft carrier turns slowly, doesn't it?
It does.
You're dealing with hundreds of years of military culture, aren't you?
You certainly are, and it's predominantly men on those aircraft carriers. The question is going to be, what does the military do in an isolated area like an aircraft carrier when you're out for months? What about a submarine? Women are on submarines now.
Sure.
I mean, personally, I didn't like the idea, but it's the reality, and I don't know that they're adequately accommodating that. Maybe the women wait until after they're out, after 6 months of deployment underwater, and then report it. But then it's their word against the other person's.
We have had an ear and an eye full of Afghanistan this week. Giddy Fox News is looping that sad footage of people hanging onto the military transport plane. They can't resist the side-by-side with Saigon 1975. Hilary, you talk to folks all around the world all the time. How are the people back home in the UK and elsewhere reacting to this bad USA look we're having now?
Well, and Holland, I would actually say it's more than a look. Pictures don't lie. A picture tells 1,000 words. This is the issue. People are on different sides of the political aisle. I'll never pretend to speak for people in different nations who have different political views, but there's a fact. It's not when we withdrew, and it's not withdrawing. It's how we withdrew. I'm not a military expert like Michael, but even I know you always take the civilians out first. you take the equipment out second, and you take the military out third, and you let our allies know. We were supposed to be, America's back to what? This is the worst thing that's been done to our allies in basically over a century of having allies around the world as a global power. In Australia, if you heard the press conference, Biden's press conference, there was an Australian woman, her reporter, her exact comment was, Australians are angry. I will say the Brits, Boris Johnson spent 36 hours dialing Biden with no answer.
Ouch.
We betrayed our allies. Next time we want our allies to stand by us and send their boys to die, send their equipment and support us as the USA, what are our allies going to do? This is a horrendous lack of foreign policy. It was how it was done. Doesn't matter whether you agree about the timing, doesn't matter whether you think that we should or we shouldn't have done. How it was done was atrocious. And the last point is, to be that pathetic, to then blame Trump, that election was a long time ago. They've had months and months and months. This was atrocious.
Well, whenever you rip off the Band-Aid, it was going to be ugly. What do you make of this?
It could have been done. I think if Trump were in, we would still have troops there, because he conditioned the withdrawal. Taliban couldn't have met him. They would not have met him. We would have stayed. And the problem is it's not 10,000 Americans that are stranded there. It's Brits, French. We pulled the plug even on our allies. And Hillary is right. How can you trust? I mean, this will have an impact on any NATO commitment in the future.
Yep.
Yes.
I mean, we are at a crossroads of decision making that will impact our prestige and our dignity forever. I personally think that Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Milley need to resign.
No heads have rolled yet. There's been a lot of question about Anthony Blinken.
If they want to salvage their reputation, they should.
And also, there's a ripple effect. The ripple effect is, imagine recruiting the next generation to go into our military when they see we're left behind.
Sure.
Can you imagine people going into the Foreign Service and diplomatic corps?
It's devastating.
Recruiting is going to be ghastly because of this.
I'm out of time, but we'll make time for the quick answer. Take us inside the Pentagon. What is the vibe? What's the mood in the halls there?
Oh, it's depressing. I mean, they're depressed. They because we basically abandoned everything. We just cut and run. We basically surrendered
National
to the
humiliation.
Yeah, we
National
surrendered to
humiliation.
terrorists.
Ouch. Michael Maloof, Hilary Fordwich, thank you for having this conversation again. And thank you for watching The Big Picture. We're going to be back same time next week if you watch in real time. And if you don't, you can set your DVR for DirecTV channel 321 on the Dish 280. Our live stream is at youtube.com/RTAmerica. And 4 years of my humble work is at youtube.com/thebigpictureRT. And I am merely one player in a vast cast on our free portable TV app in the App Store or on Google Play or at portable.tv. We are live and on demand on any device. I'm Holland Cooke in Washington and at Holland Cooke on Twitter, where I want to hear what you want to see here in the big picture, and where if you follow me, I'll follow you. Question more.